Welcome to the Laughter Clinic podcast with comedian and suicidologist Mark McConville, bringing you practical, evidence-based self-care strategies, the latest research in mental health, along with conversations that inspire, educate, and entertain. This is the Laughter Clinic podcast with your host, Mark McConville.
Hi, my friends. Welcome to this episode of the Laughter Clinic podcast. And today's conversation does actually come with a content warning, as everything today is centered around suicide and suicide prevention. So listener discretion is advised. This episode may not be for you. And you know what? That is totally fine. It's totally understandable. But if you do stick around, you're going to hear one of an incredibly powerful conversation, because my guest today, it's very special to me, this episode, because we're very lucky to have Associate Professor and Program Director of Suicidology at the Australian Institute for Suicide Research and Prevention, which is based at Griffith University. That's right. My guest is Jacinta Hawgood. Jacinta is a fully registered, clinically endorsed psychologist and the program director, as I said, and course convener of the Grad Cert in Suicidology and the Master of Suicidology programs, which she actually joint developed with Professor Diego DeLeo back in 2001. Jacinta has extensive experience working in the development and implementation and evaluation of online suicide prevention training and education. And she is also the lead author of the STARS protocol, which is the systematic tailored assessment for responding to suicidality, which we're going to chat about as well today. Jacinta has worked on research and evaluation programs for organisations such as Beyond Blue, Roses in the Ocean, the Department of Veteran Affairs, Mates in Construction, Suicide Prevention Australia, the Australian Psychological Society, Queensland Corrective Services, Queensland Mental Health Commission, and even the Commonwealth Department of Health. You know, just a lot of experience, a lot of people take notice of the work that this lady does. Jacinta is also a member of several government and non-government advisory boards regarding suicide prevention. She's a past director of Suicide Prevention Australia and a current non-executive director of Mates in Construction. And she also has a reviewing role for peer-reviewed journals and has presented her research findings at a range of state, national and international conferences, along with contributing to multiple government reports in the field of suicide prevention. So, look, while Jacinta is all of these things, you know, incredible, the body of work that she has put together, to me personally, she is someone who believed in me when I first met her back in 2014, and I was just a comedian wanting to explore the role of humour and laughter into helping to prevent suicide. Jacinta was my senior lecturer and associate research supervisor during my master's degree, and she guided me through my thesis and my pilot study of my humour and laughter education program. And over the years, she has mentored me and helped me bridge the worlds that most people thought couldn't be bridged, and that is using humour and laughter education to help prevent suicide. Jacinta is, you know, for the past 25 plus years, she has dedicated her life to suicide prevention research, education and clinical practice. And I've got to tell you, I'm deeply honoured and incredibly grateful to have her join me today. So if you work in the field of suicide prevention anywhere in the world, you would have heard of Jacinta Hawgood and the work that she has done. So, look, whether you have a lived experience of suicide or suicidal behaviour, you're supporting someone in their own struggles, you've lost someone to suicide, or maybe you work in this very challenging field, or maybe you're just someone who would like to know more about the complexities involved with helping to prevent suicide, this is a very powerful episode that I know you will get something out of. So, like I said, my friends, listener discretion is advised. Please join me in welcoming to the Laughter Clinic podcast, Associate Professor Jacinta Hawgood. Jacinta Hawgood, welcome to the Laughter Clinic podcast. Great to see you. I'm so grateful for your time and really appreciate you being on. How are you going?
Yeah. Hi, Mark. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
How was your
Yeah,
Chris?
start of
How
the
was
new
your
year.
Chrissy and New Year's?
Yeah, it was really good. Had a bit of a break. Clearly now we're back to the grindstone, but yeah, very much enjoyed it. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Okay, so I'm very conscious of your time, so let's get straight into it. So all of the guests on the Laughter Clinic podcast get asked the same question to start with, and that centres around the saying laughter is the best medicine. Now, this is a saying that's been around for over 3,000 years, and now we have modern day research supporting the physical benefits of laughter and the psychological benefits of using your sense of humour as a coping mechanism and building resilience. So, as someone, with the vast amount of experience you have in the field of mental health and suicide prevention, when you hear the term laughter is the best medicine, what does that conjure up for you?
It reminds me of when I was a child, for a
Okay.
start.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I've heard my parents, for example, saying, "Yeah, laughter's the best medicine." Now always look for the positive and everything. Everything's glass half full. Doesn't mean you can't have your anger and distress and other emotions, but certainly, yeah, when you're a happy person, and then the message that happiness comes from within, being such a big part of my development and narrative, then you really do start to be conscious of how good it feels
Mm.
when you do laugh. And I always think of what we learned right through many kind of decades ago, through even the biological and physiological elements of therapy, when
Mm.
you're looking at the physical response when you smile. Even
Yeah.
when you get into fits of laugh, you can actually experience, of course, the physiological elements of
Mm.
serotonin release, etc., and endorphins, but you actually literally physically feel the benefits. So
Yeah.
yeah, means definitely means that it can be a positive part of
Mm.
experiencing a good positive well-being.
Yeah, cool. I love the connection aspect of it, like when you're connecting with your tribe, your friends and family, the
Yeah.
people that you share that sense of humor with. It's and even at the comedy club when you've got 200 or 300 strangers or 1,000 strangers in a room all laughing together, it's just powerful.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. It does remind me of having attended some of your comedy gigs as well. And I often have thought of that when we're watching you and the other comedians. Just you can see, you just have to look around the room and
Mm.
people share that connection
Mm.
of being in a happy place. It's
Yeah.
almost like you're in a dome, because
Yeah, yeah.
there's that shared medicine is like contagious around the room. And as soon as someone has a belly laugh, even if you're not listening or you've just gone to the toilet or the bar or something and come back out, you start laughing. Like
Yeah.
so definitely I think it's a shared thing.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Okay, so thank you for answering that. Now let's get into it. So for people, someone that might be listening, right, who may be struggling with their own mental health personally, or they've got someone in their lives that they're worried about. What do you think is the most important thing you'd like someone to know?
Yeah, good question. There's so many things, of course,
Mm.
but there's two elements to that. So the person themselves experiencing kind of hopelessness and distress and potentially, suicide ideation, I would say that every person who experiences it in a different way.
Mm.
And so we know from the kind of vast majority of people who've been there and have come through it that definitely there is hope, and there's definitely another experience other than that one that can come to you. But definitely there are many different things that will work for different people.
Mm.
So saying that it's temporary, for example, may not work for many people who their experience is very long term. So I'd say I get it.
Mm.
Having experienced this for so long, you feel completely trapped, engulfed, overwhelmed, and it's like a pressure cooker. You're going to implode, so you just can't keep going. And I would validate those feelings, and they need to know that that can be experienced, and,
Mm.
but that at the same time, it's something where we know there are interventions and help that can be responsive to that in a positive way. And it may be that I would say to someone that you've not yet found that, or maybe you feel exhausted because you've reached out so many times, or you've experienced so many different types of help. But that, because we know so many stories of good help, that there definitely is help there. And it's I guess seeing it from a different lens, that when you're feeling so overwhelmed, alone, helpless, worthless, etc., that these are vulnerabilities that can actually become your strength, because the fact that you're here with us, being so vulnerable in that space, and is a strength, because you're here. So so I guess there's a whole lot of messages, and different messages. I think people need to be validated that their experience isn't going to be the same as someone else's, and that right now it is the trickiest thing they've ever experienced. And majority of non-clinical responses today would be very much, validating the person and being there just to sit with them through those kind of quite distressing times.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's so much, in society now. The conversation around suicide is a lot more prominent than what it may have been 20 or 30 years ago, which is fantastic, with all of the days that we have, and the Are You OK Day, and all of the messages that get out there. But it still seems like, I talk to people that don't work in the field of suicide prevention when I'm tripping around, and there's still some misconceptions about suicide, and still a lot of myths about suicide out there. Do you think there's one in particular that stands out for you?
Yeah, good question. There is one that I still haven't seen a huge amount of change with response to dispelling the mythical side, if you like, of it. For me, probably the biggest one is that when people speak about it, they're not going to do it. Or the more they, or the it's kind of, I guess, wrapped up similarly with the attention seeking one, that behavior is just a cry for help or attention seeking, whatever. And I think that while our mental health literacy generally, globally even, has improved, which is an excellent thing with its impacts and associations, at least with reduced stigma, I think there still tends to be, especially in the lay population, the belief that because if people are actually going on about, I'm just going to kill myself, you don't even care about me, I'm just going to take my life or whatever, it's not worth it anymore, none of you love me. I think people think that that's kind of an attention-seeking style thing. And I've had people in my clinical practice, people who are carers, and people who really care for people, reaching out and asking me, is that, at least they're going to the next step, is that a sign that they really will take their life? Because sometimes it sounds like they're just saying that because they want me to respond to them and get attention.
Yeah.
So, and I would always say, yeah, absolutely. It is a real, authentic desire to want you to know they're in psychological pain. They're not in a good space. So it's, to that end, it's not a myth. It's a real experience. Someone really communicating that they need that help. So.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we're moving towards educating people as much as we can about dispelling the myth that you don't directly ask somebody if they are contemplating suicide or have made suicidal plans, and I think that's a real important one. Like when I go out and do live presentations, I talk about that, and to me that's one of the biggest myths. That you don't ask someone. And we now know that to be incorrect.
Yeah, absolutely. And that as well is one slightly related, hey, that, you'll push someone over the edge if you like planting the thought in their mind. And we know that's been debunked umpteen times in the literature as well, where no harm can come about from asking someone. And the most important finding surrounds our qualitative data, hearing the narrative of people who've been there. So relying on lived experience to tell us that, the fact that someone cared to ask the question is even more encouraging for me to want to be able to reveal and disclose the truth.
Yeah.
So, and that's not, of course, in all situations. For some people, they may not tell you the truth, of course, depending on where they're sitting in that space. But, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so incredibly complicated and complex, isn't it? You know, like just in the time that I've been involved with it, which is shadowed by the 25 plus years that you've been working in this field. I mean, seriously, Jacinta, so like it's a long time. Like what was there something that drew you, because it's such a specific niche field of to work in suicide prevention? Like, was there something that drew you to this to start with? You know, because I know you started out as a clinical psychologist and that sort of stuff, but to specialise in suicide prevention, there must have been something.
Mm. Oh, look, probably more to me important to my life today is the reasons for staying in the field, the
Right.
complexity and all that stuff, which I'll get to. But to answer your question, yeah, like I was very young. I'd done social science, worked in juvenile justice, and I spent at the same time studying psychology. And part of my experiences, even with my dissertation in my honours psych degree, was about comparing the needs and unmet needs of, we called back then juvenile delinquents, right? Of course, young people who were in prison.
Right.
And so my thesis was gathering data from them, both the females and male prisons, which they don't have today in Queensland, and hearing some of their stories about wanting to die, etc., and thinking there's so many opportunities, but it was so much shelved in the general field of mental health in ways that we could respond, particularly because there's a lot of stigma around being in prison in the first place. Well, they need to be punished, and why would we reach out to help someone who's experiencing, you know, not wanting to take their lives? So that was very much part of my social work sort of days while I was studying psychology. But when I got a post as part of my scholarship in my master's from Queensland Health out bush, working out remote, I was in Charters Towers, and that was where I was just decided I'd sink my teeth into Professor Graham Martin's Keep Yourself Alive for GPs course and become a trainer.
Right.
And I did that, and that's my interest just really grew from there. And we just had zero skills in the workforce, even my peers, right through to police, but from social workers, nurses, all up in Charter Towers, there was very little around what to do. So this program was one of the first. There were others, of course, back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, but it was one that, even though designed for GPs, that we could pick up. And so that just got my passion going. And then I was recruited to work at AISRAP, Australian Institute for Suicide Research and Prevention, where got straight into really getting interested through the development of the postgrad and other training programs.
Yeah, AISRAP. So let's talk a bit about AISRAP. And was it Professor Diego DeLeo? Was Diego the one that actually brought you in, the then director?
Yes, correct. Yeah. So now emeritus, of course, but it is still with AISRAP from afar initially.
Yeah.
But he recruited. It was basically the end of 1999 that I had my interview, and I was appointed as a senior research assistant, working on a quite a big statewide needs analysis through Queensland Health. It was actually a cross-government department, part of the youth suicide prevention strategy at the time, to look at the competencies, skills, knowledge, attitudes, aptitude across a whole range, cross-sectoral, multidisciplines that would be working in suicide prevention. So I was on that project.
Were you in awe of Diego when you first met him? Because I know when I first met him, I sat down with him for a couple of hours, and like I was so grateful for his time to start with. And I came away from that meeting thinking I've just met a really special human being.
For sure, yeah. Look, he literally brought to Australia. I mean, his leadership had gone for many years, obviously globally, his reputation as well, hence his appointment at Griffith. But he then really did make a mark, particularly first in Queensland, but then nationally, which is reflected in the now Suicide Prevention Australia's Diego DeLeo address, which is part of the conference proceedings. Certainly he has this ability to think really critically and in a 360-degree kind of way of understanding the phenomenon, which wasn't seen before. And he brought culture and cultural interpretations to a typically and traditionally very much emphasized medicalized interpretation of suicide. So these elements and being able to see the person, because of course a few years after I started there, we opened the Life Promotion Clinic, which was the first ever outpatient clinic, alternative to hospitalised based care for those who had made a suicide attempt, and which ran for many years. And it was his ideation behind that model of care. And the whole idea was to have kind of diversified responses, multimodal, holistic care for a person, trying to address their needs. So it wasn't just psychiatry and psychology, you know. So, but yeah, so definitely I learned a lot from him, and it was because of that, being able to see a person more than just needing pharmacological kind of need responses to their needs, that really, I think, reeled me in.
Yeah. And so now here we are 25 plus years later. For those listening that may not be aware of AISRAP, the Australian Institute for Suicide Research and Prevention, based at Griffith University, can you just give our listeners a bit of a outline as to, you know, just leading into 2026, where is AISRAP at now, and you know, what does the institute do? Like, I know what you guys do, but for those of you that listening, you know, let's give AISRAP a plug.
Well, yeah, look, for sure, there's been some change since, unfortunately, when Diego had to leave in 2015 due to health concerns. So we tried to continue as an independent centre for some time, but in 2018 we merged, well, really not so much merged with the School of Psychology, but fell as an entity underneath the umbrella of School of Applied Psychology. So now we have suicidology, psychology and counselling under that school. So AISRAP's role is not only in being very expert and specialist at a research and educational level within the School of Applied Psychology, but also we're affiliated with and a member of the Griffith Centre for Mental Health research. So it's kind of a nice way to be able to collaborate and engage with a whole range of other disciplines, you know, outside of the strictly AISRAP kind of agenda, but we still maintain that specialist expertise. We're small, of course, but we have leadership by the Director of the World Health Organization, Professor Kyrie Colves, and we have Dr. Luke Bayliss and Dr. Sadvi, and we have Dr. Vicky Ross, and we have a few other really important and valuable senior researchers and research assistants, and we have Wendy Iverson, who remains both across AISRAP and psychology as the research development officer, manager, if you like. So yeah, we're still an entity, and there's lots of exciting grants that we've kind of been successful with recently, particularly in veterans, construction, and suicide assessment. So these are really important for our progressing the agenda of what we have as our scope.
It's so unique, the educational aspect of it, you know, like, because when you think about it, where else in the world can you get postgraduate qualifications in, you know, suicide prevention and suicidology? It's amazing how many people that I meet where, they see that I have a master's degree in suicidology and they go, is that a thing?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So still today I encounter, you know, the same comments. Suicidology, what does that mean? And a few years ago in the Crisis editorial, there was an excellent 4 or 5 pages, if anyone's interested, editorial around suicidology and being a suicidologist that came out. But yeah, it's the postgrad programs that we developed back in 2001 are the only kind of their type in the world in terms of being a full postgraduate qualification in suicidology. Over time, of course, there's other courses or certificates that have come out in different specific areas like self-harm and suicide or something like that. But generally, yeah, they're definitely something different and unique, and they're not something that becomes a mandated requirement to do a particular job. Unlike, for example, to be a psychologist, you need a psychology degree, etc., etc.
Yeah.
There's no degree to be a suicidologist.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an incredible legacy item really for AISRAP, isn't it? Like what a great legacy to have in the field of mental health and suicide prevention, to have those programs in place.
Yeah, for sure. I
You
think
must be very proud. You must be
yeah.
very proud of that.
Yeah, look, I'm very proud. It's not even like just Diego and I and a team of administration personnel, and we had the support of the then dean and VC to create, develop, and deliver these programs. I guess the proudest thing about the programs for me is the uptake. It's still always going to be a small thing because of the fact that it's not a mandated qualification in any particular occupation, but it's been sustainable. So, that says to me, A, there's a need, and B, the issue hasn't gone away, of course. We've done as much as, we're getting closer and closer, of course, doing as much as we can to prevent suicide, but there's still so much more that can be done, clearly. There's always this need to learn more and acquire more. And the one thing I've watched in probably the last decade is the cohort of students has moved from being just mature age students to including people who are a few years out of high school, and certainly it's still a postgrad degree, so they have to have done an undergrad degree, but there's a younger age group coming through as well. So, I think there's definitely continued need for it.
Yeah, you never know who's going to want to do a master's degree in suicidology, do you? Like even the odd comedian. Well, I reckon I am the only comedian that has actually gone through and done that course.
Yeah, I think you are, Mark. And it's very interesting. Actually, what year did you enroll?
We met in 2014. This is one thing that I actually wanted to ask you, right? Because we met in 2014. I started the degree in 2015, the grad cert. And, I came into this after having met with Diego with these grand plans of, using humour and laughter therapy or education in some way to help prevent suicide. And, I tell the story about, starting university for the first time in my life at a postgraduate level at the age of 45, after not having finished high school. Like I really wasn't the typical student that you would have coming into that degree, When Diego first approached you and said, "I've just met this guy," right, this comedian guy, what were your initial thoughts? Can you remember?
Yeah, for sure. I do remember we had a chat about it because we hadn't yet considered prerequisite or entry criteria of people that did not have some existing qualification reasonably related to the field. What is that in terms of suicide, right? It's a multifaceted, requiring multidisciplinary responses. So who knows, or who would have even considered, for example, that a comedian could potentially be a preventionist, interventionist. So, it was part of the pun, but it was a bit funny.
Yeah. I'm sure. Well, because it would have been something like a comedian? What?
Yeah, exactly. And I said, how's this going to work? So, because we'd also seen since 2001 fluctuations internally, and this is probably the same across most universities, where you revisit the entry criteria, prerequisites, dependent on not so much back then the number of students that were able to enter, more so now, but realistically, were they able to cope academically? Were they able to step into what would be required, or are we setting them up to fail if they have the competencies academically? Today it's completely different, of course, because we have AI, we have so many more elements, mechanisms to assist and facilitate learning. And of course there's some negatives to a lot of the improvements as well. but mostly advantages. So when you entered, I do recall we were loosening a little bit the entry criteria to say work-based experience would be able to assist for the graduate certificate. Back then it was called graduate certificate in suicide prevention. Now it's graduate certificate in suicidology.
Right. Yeah, well, I've got to tell you, like from a supportive point of view, there was, there is no way that I could have got through that because it was hard. I found it quite, confronting and hard because of learning how to learn, and the support that I got from not only yourself personally, but all the team at AISRAP who kind of got behind me and helped me, get to where I am now. I'll never forget it. The Laughter Clinic is what it is now. All of the support that I receive from yourself and AISRAP is contributing to the work that I do now and continue to do.
Well, that's very, very nice, Mark, of you to convey, because I think it works the other way as well, right? Like, we've watched your growth, unbelievable growth, and I remember your grades from the beginning. And
we still laugh.
Unbelievable.
Because I remember saying to someone, my first essay, I stupidly thought that they were interested in what I had to say. I don't think I had any references. It's just like, you need to really,
That's right. Yeah. So it's just learning. It's just learning how to write academically and understanding all that sort of stuff. And at the time, we didn't have proper tutorial type support set up for you. So, but what we noted, which is part of our really core part of how we do like to give assessment feedback to our students, is give something that's useful. Don't just tick cross, but really what has been done well here and you took it all on board. And by the end of the course, you came up with, I recall, you were able to go into your dissertation. I think it's an amazing journey you've had. It's an excellent example of, a journey where you think the impossible, and then you yield just through your experience something phenomenal, and you've really made a mark because I recall at the time the readiness in the sector wasn't there to have a comedian come and talk about something so serious, right? So since then, there's been this escalation, and more recently even a steep escalation in people wanting to add some sort of comedy, humour, theatre, whatever, to the more creative side of understanding suicidality. And it's the way in which it's done. So I don't think people were ready for, nor opened probably enough doors for you at the time. And of course, I think that you've done a tremendous amount of work to get to a point where you've enabled it to be a very safe and useful strategy in respect to suicide prevention. And so I think it's a phenomenal amount of work that you've done. You're an adjunct with us at AISRAP. I think you advocate strongly for suicide prevention on all levels. And one of the things I think that I admire that I think is rarely seen in students today, or it's probably more difficult to identify, but is the constant, as an alumni, you've constantly remained contact with us and always seeking out the facts or the safety or the appropriateness of anything and everything that you've encountered that you want to get your teeth into, but so you're doing your due diligence all the time. And in this space, we do have to be cognizant of that. And I think, it's being respectful of the fact that there's a whole amount of impact that can happen through being unsafe in the way that we deliver suicide prevention.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I do appreciate it. And that kind of leads into, the next thing that I really wanted to talk about is how suicide prevention has changed over the years in relation to the impact of lived experience and the voice of lived experience on suicide prevention protocols and stuff. It's really made a big difference, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Like, even if we say that back in the earliest of my AISRAP days, at least, that we we valued lived experience, etc. And we really did. We had people send us letters. We had people come in to visit AISRAP. We heard them. We tried to respond to things, ideas, bring them into, setting up community action for prevention of suicide, setting up support groups, opening the clinic because of what patients had told us was feeling marginalised, dehumanised, etc., and requiring a more holistic, person-centred approach. So all of that has been happening, but nowhere near the way in which it should be happening. So in other words, not just an adjunct, but lived experience is really about just completely shifting how we understand suicide prevention, that clinicians and medical people and academics, we're not the experts of a person's experience. But I think the biggest evolutionary change from my perspective, because I'm both a clinician, wearing my clinician hat and my academic research hat and educational hat, but also being a mother and having kids with experiences in this space. So I think the biggest change has been how we've tried to integrate lived experience in the prevention field with other experts. So having and not having a lived experience doesn't have to be right or wrong. And so I didn't think this would happen 5 to 10 years ago, because there was I think it's tricky when you're entertaining and bringing in something unknown or unfamiliar. Change is hard for people, especially at a high level sector. So I think that's slowly shifting. That's the biggest change, is not just owning how important and valuable and acknowledging the contributions, important contributions we've delivered experience, but really owning their role and space in a sector that still is predominantly led by clinicians or academics, etc. And knowing, however, that both clinical and non-clinical, peer and non-peer, whatever, from a workforce perspective, from a policy perspective, etc., knowing that they all have a place. So no one is right. If we don't own and collaborate and work together and work in an integrated way, so that continuity of care, continuity of policy, organisational responsiveness, workplace safety, otherwise that's never going to happen in an effective way. So that's the most recent shift, which I'm hoping will continue to develop and flourish, because I don't believe the sector should be one or the other. We all have to work together in respectful and kind of kind ways around the best way forward.
Well, that working together, that statement, working together, is really the heart and soul of the STARS protocol, really, isn't it?
It is, yes.
So let's talk about that, because I know that you're incredibly proud of this, and as indeed you should be. For want of a better term, there's a lot of different, the term used to be risk assessments for suicide and that sort of stuff, but now we're making it a lot more centred and psychosocial risks and taking a lot of those things into account. But the STARS protocol, just talk to our listeners about that, because I know this is a big thing for you.
Thanks. And it is, I am really proud of it. I mean, it's still developing. There's still so many lessons to learn around it. But so the systematic tailored assessment for responding to suicidality protocol, so we call it STARS-P, it evolved from way back in 2015. It was called STARS, but it actually had a different acronym. It was a screening tool for assessing risk of suicide.
Screening tool, that's right, screening tool.
So and it was very much, but it was so much more than just a screening tool. But yet we had the terminology wrong. It was at the time kind of appropriate, not really, and it was still, I guess, I got excellent feedback just before I commenced formally my PhD from Professor Nav Kapoor over in the UK. he's an excellent, remains an excellent colleague and friend, and he very much gave really useful feedback around, it can be misleading, the word tool, and it sends a message that we're doing some sort of psychometric administration, which we know, as you said before, we don't do risk assessment as we traditionally used to, categorizing risk as low, medium, high, because it's unhelpful. It's predominantly, and I know we've moved from that. We all, as a sector, are well aware of that now. But categorizing people when they're experiencing majority fluid experiences, and also the way in which we concluded that someone was low, medium, high. Those ways were very not objective, and very checklist approach, yes, no answers, and it never has encapsulated the real experience of an individual in their little trajectory and how they experience, distress and suicidal crisis, etc. So yeah, and so I guess 2015 made a lot of changes, removed the categorization elements, listened to lived experience. We had people from the Life Promotion Clinic, a whole range of patients at the time, who we interviewed informally. We didn't actually publish that data back then, but because that qualitative information was in fact what informed the 2018, 17 and 18 versions, which says 2018 became the basis of my PhD. And that was really the timing for, I guess, globally. And I was working very closely with some of the global leaders to really put out on the table psychosocial needs. So it's all about understanding what are the unmet needs of the person. Obviously, their protective factors, but not at the detriment of also understanding their suicidal state. So psychosocial needs-based assessment, which is best practice, internationally renowned to be the NICE guidelines, RANSF guidelines in Australia, all point to this as the main way of accessing information that's real and personalised to inform safety for the person. However, what they don't probably emphasise as much, but it should be known, so I'm glad I have the opportunity to say this, is that it does also include the suicide inquiry, which is requires quite a bit of competency and skill around trying to understand both past and current suicidal ideation, intent, plans, behaviour. I'm really getting a unique understanding for that person of their story, their narrative around what escalates them, what brings them down, what context, situational, cultural elements are involved in that experience, so that we can build safety with them. They can take the reins where that's possible, to build the safety plan that also addresses, in the short term, of course, their unmet needs and drivers towards wanting to die.
People can do the STARS training online, and for anyone listening, who do you think is suited to doing this training for STARS?
So the STARS protocol, and now we have the STARS Young Persons Protocol. We're just finishing the development of that through an MRFF grant. So they both are going to be offered digitally. So it's an online as well as hard copy interview schedule for the clinician or non-clinician, and they're available this year. So yeah, you don't have to be a clinician to use the protocol. So you can be a teacher, a nurse, you can be a caseworker, a youth worker, a clergy, you can be a support worker. So generally, the eligibility to enter the training for STARS has to be someone who's in a position of being supportive of and responsive to someone who experiences suicidal distress. So we generally don't have parents come in, for example, and say, look, I want to do the STARS training. So it's more a protocol to guide your interviewing with the person collaboratively, sitting there with them to identify what next in terms of, well, obviously safety. That's the most important thing, to bring them to a place of safety right now. But even short term, what can we look at and how to address sort of your unmet needs? Yeah.
And, in recent years, we've had an increase in rates of, psychological distress for young people, adolescents, and the youth suicide rate. Is that kind of what led to you developing STARS YP, or was it something that you thought, there's certain things in this protocol that we really need to specifically hone into adolescents?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've always had people since the adult one was developed attending our training that work with children and adolescents, and they've kind of taken what they wanted from it, and as a lot of people do, and they kind of tailor how they use it, which isn't what we'd 100% like to happen. But look, if there's stuff that can be useful, so we didn't actually do research on its feasibility, applicability, utility for young people. That one.
Yep.
So when the opportunity came to apply for money, to grant money from the national government, federal government, to be able to develop this, absolutely we jumped on it. So we knew the need was there. We had an adult-based protocol interview that follows all the best practice guidelines on how do we collaboratively do an empowering, if you like, interview process with someone that isn't dehumanizing, to explore ways to keep them safe.
Yeah.
So as soon as that happened, went for the grant money and medical research, future fund research, and then we together, it was completely co-designed. So we engaged Headspace centres from Victoria and Queensland, Children's Hospital in Queensland, Children's Hospital in Victoria. So we had two different settings, community and hospital, to at both staff and clinicians, as well as young people and their parents, to tell us what adult items that sit in the STARS protocol. There's three main areas, A, B, and C. A is the suicide inquiry, B is the factors, psychosocial factors of most concern for young people / adults. And then C is the things that keep people living, so the protective factors. And we asked them all their perceptions around what they think needed modification, what's more important, what needs to be removed, added, etc. And you converge all those living experience perspectives, what we know as well scientifically, and kind of that triangulation of findings led to what we now have. And it will need more refinement over time, of course. But yeah, that was the main reason. People are calling out for responses to the suicidality, the increased suicidality in young people, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, that call, I think, comes from, I don't think the general public really appreciates the complexity of working in the field of suicide prevention and how complicated it actually is, I remember, one of the first things that we learned going through the masters was about the three tiers of suicide prevention, the universal, let's see, I go here, universal, indicated, universal, selective, and indicated. Have I got that right?
Yep, that's it. That's it. Good memory.
Yeah. Yep. So for those listening, because you're going to do a hell of a lot better job of explaining it than what I am. Okay, so can you run through our listeners what those three tiers of suicide prevention look like?
Yeah. So for listeners, in suicide prevention, we generally, all over the world, use the public health model, if you like. Public health model just simply means it's not specifically, for example, strictly medical, and it's not strictly just social or whatever. It's kind of quite a broad model of responding to anything, disease, whatever. So with respect to suicide, the public health model suggests that we do a kind of simultaneous addressing of how to reduce at the highest level universally, how do we reduce risk factors and enhance protective factors. So
keeping the population healthy in the first place?
Yeah, keep the population well, prevent anyone on a trajectory towards potentially experiencing negative impacts or risk factors, etc., giving them skills, coping mechanisms, etc., to alleviate that. So everyone, the whole thing is universal, is about, it's the whole population who are in receipt of public health responses to keep the population well.
Yeah.
And under that, as you said, is the selected responses or interventions. So universal, everyone gets it. Selected is those who, there's people in the population who are, by virtue of the family they've come from or the community they live in, etc., have risk factors. They may not be suicidal at all, but they may experience certain risk factors such as depression or some type of mental illness, or which I should disclose, not everyone who has a mental illness will go on to die by suicide or be even suicidal. So it's just that we know that there's some population-based risk factors that enhance vulnerability for, or risk, if you like, for suicide. And so that selected population will be recipients of selected interventions. And so, you might have selected interventions such as domestic violence kind of awareness. Well, that's really a universal one, but domestic violence, addiction programs, and like there's many interventions that allow people who are experiencing some sort of risk factors. Then we have indicated, and indicated is that if you imagine an upside down triangle, you've got universal, selected, reflecting how much of the population they're addressing, and then right under the triangle is indicated. So indicated responses of those who actually are experiencing suicidality, ideation, behaviour, etc., and they require access to more, if you like, pointy end in inverted commas, but responses. So health services, mental health therapies, whether it be self-help or offered by health professionals, peer workforce, so to keep them safe and to intervene and prevent relapse, etc. So it's just, there's a lot more. Anyone can go out, any listeners can Google public health model for suicide prevention. Jane Perkins and others have done some excellent editorials in Crisis. They're all free, accessible as full text articles as well. So you can have a look at that. It's basically the highest level to remember. Everyone's exposed to those interventions and responses where money goes when you hear about universal prevention. And then selected and indicated are those that come, if you're coming down the triangle, that provide that extra bit of focused or tailored care for people in those.
There's a lot of research, isn't there, around supporting universal intervention, early intervention programs and all that sort of stuff. I know one of the big things in Australia is community engagement. We've got like you and I have travelled out to Charleville, and we've, you go out to these regional centres and they might not have mental health services or access to mental health services. And there was that study that was done, I think it came out at the end of 24, where was it the Mental Health Commission talking about it was either 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 Australians were not seeking mental health services purely due to cost of living, and so I'm constantly saying to people that community engagement, community engagement, keeping the population healthy and engaging with the people around you is so incredibly important.
Absolutely. And you mentioned housing. So at a universal level, government funding, state government funding, initiatives that, for example, make more housing accessible and available, it would be a universal response, response. Having financial strategies available for people, having awareness raising elements, stigma reduction campaigns, these are all universal initiatives that everyone's exposed to. But community engagement. So community, absolutely at a universal level, it's like provides so many, we know from the literature, and we do tend to have mostly, when we look at protective factors, studies that have focused on community when we look at protective factors. So sense of belonging and connectedness, what different communities offer, whether it be small church communities or social clubs, whatever, communities of all types can be really protective for sure. Yeah.
Is there one thing in particular, like one of those field, the universal indicated and selected, is there somewhere in that triad that you think we need to really improve?
At every level, we can continue to improve and do better. We need to look at what's not working in the initiatives that we're using to inform how we can improve. And that should be a constant kind of focus. And we can see, for example, in universal responses right now, there's a big move across population across workplace settings. So we look at the settings element within universal, and workplace responses to prevent suicide and prevent even mental health, mental ill health, I should say, has been given a lot of attention. We have the psychosocial code of conduct that's coming a few years ago. We want to not just prevent physical injury, but we want to keep people safe and look after their well-being. This whole focus here. So, where I think the focus should just be on what can we continue to do better. And in the crisis spaces or in the indicator selected, we need to work better with integrating clinical and non-clinical and understanding where the benefits are and how they most impact positive outcomes for people as well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about outcomes for people because, let's zone in on Australia. At the moment, I think it was at the end of September or October, the ABS brought out the latest suicide statistics for our country. So we got the data for 2024, and we're still over that 3,000 individuals mark. I think it was 3,307 individuals we actually lost to suicide in 2024, which is, one of the things that I'm talking when I go out and do these presentations, I'm constantly saying to people, you got to remember that these are not just numbers. They're not numbers. They're not statistics. These are actual individuals. And I really would like to have a chat with you about the ripple effect of these people taking their own lives throughout the community and throughout society in Australia, because you talk about that number as tragic as what it is, and every single one of those deaths is without a doubt a tragedy. But the ripple effect through society is, something that really doesn't get taken into it. It doesn't get the recognition and the understanding that I think it deserves.
Yeah, and you're right. I think we don't really, the ripple effect or the tsunami effect, if you like.
Tsunami effect,
is really difficult to measure. And there have been studies done, of course, and we've moved along from saying, 6 to 8 people, in the early, 60s, 70s have been impacted, to now knowing there's a lot more than that. Of
135. That statistic came out, and and I remember thinking at the time, that's an incredible number, but when you think about it, friends, next door neighbours, first responders, health professionals, that one event ripples like it is a tsunami.
Yeah, quite so. So yeah, look, definitely there's so many immeasurable and unmeasured impacts. Because exposure is one thing, but then impacts is even more difficult and tricky to measure. But certainly, look, I know that 135 is the kind of most latest referred to level of some sort of, what's the word?
Exposure? Is it exposure?
Not impact. Exposure's kind of even greater, but impact in a way that's quite significant for every suicide. But of course, I think the kind of bigger question or the bigger issue is, even with that, right, enough's enough. Like we know it's even greater in many ways as well, and potentially for different settings or age groups, etc., and cultures, whatever. But it's like, well, so what are we doing about that? Talk about not getting attention. I think, we have the term postvention that refers to everything we do in the aftermath of a death by suicide. How much can you do in what settings and with whom, and how do you identify them, and etc. are really important questions. I'm not directly in the postvention space, but certainly have done still quite a bit in respect of that, particularly at the clinical level. But I think as postvention, the one thing that's always stood out for me from the original definition of Schneiderman, which was to obviously provide support for people in the aftermath, but also to identify those who potentially could be vulnerable. That part of it we probably haven't addressed enough, because it's very hard to do that. You do it in the immediate, like in school settings and other things, generally in communities, or now that we have all this online mediums of governing our lives, it's really tricky to do that. So we do have to get better, more innovative, responsive to that, because Schneiderman's original kind of definition was about a proactive thing. So it's like, how does prevention become postvention, or postvention become prevention?
Yeah.
And so that's the scenario that probably needs to be considered a bit more closely when we consider the tsunami effect, if you like. How do we better be proactive in our prevention meeting postvention and vice versa?
Well, that being proactive is it's a wonderful segue into one thing that I really wanted to chat with you about, is because your work, as clinical as what it is and research-based as what it is, you do a beautiful job of transferring that into real-world practice, and this is seen through the phenomenal job that the organisation Mates in Construction do, throughout Australia. And I know that there's been recent things that where Mates is going international, which is so incredibly exciting. So for those people that don't know, talk to us about the wonderful organisation that is Mates in Construction.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Like that's honestly, no, you're going to go there, but that Mates in Construction is very close to my heart. It is a phenomenal organisation. Every organisation has bits and pieces they can improve, of course, and ways to do better. But I really do think Mates in Construction has shifted globally how we do prevention within industries and workplace for occupations at risk as well. And it's had an overflow effect into other, occupations and workplaces, and just generally a lot of the concepts. So I'm fortunate, I'm very proud to be the chair of the Queensland Northern Territory Board, but I'm also in the National Board. And so there's obviously clearly bias when I say this, but it originated back in 2006 and was formalised in 2008 as a suicide prevention mental health initiative program, if you like. It was in 2006 that we were approached to respond to the Queensland Royal Commission into the commercial construction industry suicides, and that investigation resulted in recommendations for a program of the nature of what is Mates, but essentially it was an all of industry created, led by Jorgen Goldstrup, who's the current CEO of National Mates. But certainly it took, and this is the innovative nature of it, which is people are trying to replicate, which is great, but it's developed by the industry. And the industry means every element of the industry, from unions to employers like master builders to super funds, and it's fully lived experience at its core. So as in, the people who built the program, from Jorgen to others, had their own stories, lived and living experience, together with the research that we know is relevant and tailored for the actual industry itself. The male culture, obviously there's females. We have a increasing percentage, small, but of females, and hopefully higher in the future. But certainly a lot of the original risk factors that we identified in this occupation were associated with being male. But of course, alcohol, financial elements, it's too big to go into. But the bottom line is what we've also, I'm very proud of the fact that, looking at the protective elements of this industry, what are the great things about the industry? The mateship, the cohesiveness, the ability to be authentic, and this peer-based model has actually really made significant impacts on suicide rates, we believe, we hypothesize. And there's increasing programs that have come out of, what are the voices on the ground? What is the industry telling us they need to reduce suicide? So we've got so many now different programs for respond, for aftermath of a suicide. That's a proactive model. We have supervisor training, apprenticeship programs, because that's where the highest suicide rates occur, in the 15 to 24, or if you like, 18 to 30 sort of age group in our industry. We have programs for, obviously the model itself is multi-level program with the universal selected indicated style kind of initiatives. We have programs for employers, And obviously the very core of the model, we have the peer mateship delivered through Assist Living Works, but tailored to our own workers. So we have the connectors who've done that training. We have the general awareness training that everyone on site might do.
The toolbox talks. I mean, so many guys, that have been to the toolbox talks, and they go, they're great. They're great.
Yeah. So it's massive. I think it's really changed the way we have conversations, how we understand that non-clinical responses, peer-based responses, can be some of the best. I think it really influences. It doesn't have to be a medicalized understanding or response to have an impact, of course. So I think these are really important things.
Yeah. It's so incredible, and it's so nice to watch from an outsider's point of view the progress of mates, and and then the mates in mining and the offshoots that come from it, and it's very, very, should be very proud of being associated with that work.
Yeah, and that's all of the states, all the jurisdictions involved, right? All the CEOs of the different jurisdictions and their respective boards, and it's and the industry players within that. So they've just you're right. It's phenomenal work, and acknowledgement to all the funding also gathered from and it's diversified funding model, of course, but from government bodies, from big tier one commercial industries, from smaller industries. In the construction industry, they all provide money and super funds, etc., to keeping us going.
Yeah, the all important funding dollar, because there are a lot of challenges working in the field of suicide prevention, aren't there? Like as a workforce, as a sector, there's a lot of challenges. Are there ways that you feel as though we could support the sector better?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we can support the workforce, for example, whether you're a manager, a policymaker, an employer, a non-government or a government worker, frontline. Definitely we can support the workforce more. We can provide opportunities for enhanced competencies across a range of not just intervening and treating or whatever at a clinical level, but from a peer work level, from, as you said before, community engagement level. So we can do a lot more to drive out, and it's really education, knowledge, skills, aptitude, but in a way that sustains people, because I think one thing we miss in our workforce responses and our prevention responses in the sector is that sustaining yourself as an individual or your employees is huge, and it's something that's very different to sustaining yourself in, for example, a business world, in a business role or a legal role, or it's you're constantly at the forefront of what is one of the greatest tragedies of all humankind, and it's very confronting, and it's frequently part of people working in this space have their own lived experience. And it doesn't mean, I mean, there's obviously huge advantages to that, but it means that as human beings, you're working in a field where caring for the carer is often ignored. So people do care, whether it be at a clinical, non-clinical, or even policy management level, really to sustain them need some sort of support as well. So I think we don't do that. We need more of that.
Yeah, and I don't know if people really appreciate the what's the best way to put this? Like, I know there's been numerous times over the years where myself or other people that I know that it gets found out that you work in the field of suicide prevention or whatever, and then for want of a better term, you might be blindsided in a social situation by someone who finds out that that's what you do. And then all of a sudden you are finding yourself in the depths of an incredibly deep and moving and, like you said, often confronting conversation that has just come out of nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So those working in the field would probably very much resonate with with that.
Mm.
You know, people ask how can you do this work, especially if they're nowhere near the space of mental health and suicide prevention, understandably, unless they've been touched by suicide in their own kind of personal lives. How can you do that? You know, how do you keep going? But it's very difficult to grasp an understanding of the impacts that can come from this work. And as much as there's negative impacts, because I think we're just human, I think there's also really positive impacts as well, personal, growth opportunities. And
look, as much as those conversations over the years have blindsided me, or I've been put in a situation that's made me feel uncomfortable at the moment, because I might not have been prepared for it, I can honestly, hand in heart, say that afterwards, I've come away from that and having felt that it's filled my cup, being able to help that person in that moment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of people that work in this field, there's a lot of cup filling.
I think so too. Yeah, for sure. I think we probably don't acknowledge the huge benefits that come from quite naturally and organically in the role of being a support person, a carer, or an interventionist, or just being there for someone ad hoc, unplanned, in no specific role. You know, so and so there's a whole wave of gratitude in this sector, I think, as well, to be acknowledged, that we get to be a part of, helping someone out, or injecting hope, or tinkering, changing the lens of some people in a way to help them see things a little bit differently when they see things either not just hopeless, but in a negative way, from a stigma perspective, So I think these elements are probably overlooked and should be, celebrated as well. Great elements of working in this space, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, we're on the home stretch. We're going to start to wind this up because I'm conscious of your time, and there's a few things that I want to get to. So, firstly, look, we just talk about the toll and the, having been working in this sector for over 25 years, how do you do it? How do you maintain hope and resilience and keep going?
Look, I absolutely love my work, my job, and the work associated with it. The job generally, it's flexible because it's so. Being an academic allows me, and this is what I totally love, to dabble in not just research, but the education and the practice or the service. All of these in the space that I'm working in, suicide prevention, relate to each other. So they complement and enrich of all those different elements. So, and it's never boring because it's so complex that I remember coming into the field thinking I know hardly anything. And I feel now I still know hardly anything. Like, it's so complex, despite I'm continually learning and have acquired so much. So that's how I keep going in my actual job. And in terms of the work I do, I keep going, but because I've learned over time to modify. I'm not as heavy in my practice as I was, 10 years ago. So I my practice in 1999, and predominantly
your psychology practice you're talking about.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So and I've moved, just watching how I'm looking after myself, move towards still seeing bits and pieces of clinical practice, but supporting others. So supervision and educational elements. So you kind of, I guess, you've got to follow and listen to yourself in terms of where you're before it happens. So it's a proactive response before you think you might be sliding into a space of not feeling capable or doubting yourself, or all these other little bits and pieces that may indicate you're going into a place of not burnout, but just not feeling the
vicarious
best.
Trauma.
Well, that's certainly a part of this work for sure. I myself couldn't say that I've experienced this as an actual phenomenon, but certainly bits and pieces of it, absolutely. When you see clients and you learn to manage that with supervision. And and it's the most important and most invaluable growth experience, both personally and professionally, when you get that supervision to prevent any serious implications of it as a phenomenon. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. One question I really want to ask you, because you and we've seen this so many times, and what advice would you give to someone who, because we see it a lot where someone loses a loved one to suicide, whether it be husband, wife, sibling, son, daughter, whoever it is, they lose someone very close to them to suicide, and it drives them to want to be involved in the sector. We see it time and time again, and which is incredibly noble, and it's driven from the right place of not wanting anyone else to go through what they're going through. But what advice would you give to that person?
Wow, I don't know if I have advice per se, because, as you said, highly noble, but I for one haven't been in that position, so it's really tricky to make a comment around their experience. But as an observer and working so closely with so many of them, I'm absolutely astounded at the amount of energy, the dedication, the commitment, the passion, the earnest, and not everyone will want to do that. I know people who've lost their loved ones to suicide that would never even come close to wanting to do that, and yet they can still be passionate and dedicated and whatever in the way in which they have their, growth in whatever. But I would,
because it can really take its toll, and the passion is so evident. Like if I don't know, we haven't spoken about this. I don't think you and I've spoken about this, but in the last part of last year, I took a couple of friends of mine out to do some laughter clinics regionally, and it was the first time that I actually had a lived experience speaker as part of the actual presentation itself, right? So after talking about the numbers, I go, these are real people, these are real stories. And then I said, here's my friend Linda to tell her story. And she tells a story of how her family's lost 11 members to suicide throughout the course of her life, and it's a story that she really wanted to tell, and she'd never told it publicly before, and all of this sort of stuff. And it really took it out of her to do it. But the impact that she had in telling that story with the people that were in the room that came up to her afterwards, you could see that however stressful it was for her to tell that story publicly, that all went away when these people came up to her and said, thank you.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, look, for sure. I mean, and there's so many ways in which people who've lost someone to suicide can make a difference, and so many ways that they choose to make a difference. And one of them is storytelling. And there's today, I'm very thankful for the fact that there's many organisations, including Rose in the Ocean, but others that help support, educate, and provide mechanisms to make it effective, that storytelling process, right? So that everyone's kept safe, themselves and others. So I would encourage anyone, if they want to do that sort of stuff, of course, to inquire about that.
But having said that, get training, because there is language, as we know, that is positive training, and that's and training around the right things to say and the wrong things to say and that sort of stuff.
For sure, yeah. But I mean, it sounds like with that particular example that, it sounds like many people experience quite a positive impact. So this is great. There's a great outcome, and there may be people who never put their hand up or never came forward that either kind of are touched in other ways. So it's look, I mean, people are entitled to grieve in the unique way that they need to grieve, and if it's not grieving but it's taking action and wanting to be more active in that respect, then that's great too.
Mm.
Just always, I guess one of the things we always try to promote is looking after yourself and others,
Yeah.
in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
And
that. I love that. Look after yourself, look after those around you. That's how I
yeah,
sign off every episode. So
yeah,
talking about signing off,
yeah,
let's, because honestly, you and I could talk about this for hours.
yeah, for sure.
Let's wind it up with what we call the feel good five. Okay, so all guests get asked this. This is the feel good five. So Jacinta Hawgood, your answers can be as long as short as you like. So feel good five. Number one, what makes you happy?
Oh my goodness, being with the people I love, my kids, people close to me, going out, having fun. It's really other humans.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. What are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for the opportunity to be a mother.
Yeah.
And have two beautiful children in a world that's so busy and hurried, and there's so much stuff going on that I'm able to still be that mother and have these beautiful kids around me and my family. Yeah, I'm most grateful for that.
Wonderful. Question number three, what are you looking forward to? What's coming up?
Oh, I've got a couple of really great things coming up. So a couple of concerts, bit of comedy with Carl Barron.
Nice.
Short-term, events coming up. Lithuania, which is the ESSSB, European Symposium for Suicide and Self-Harm Behaviour, coming up in August.
Yeah.
And 2026 is meant to be a great year. So I'm hoping that there's even more events that I can focus on, but also just engaging in all the exciting research that we've got coming on at the moment. Yeah.
Nice one. And so question number four is, what's your me time when you want to switch off from the world and recalibrate? What do you do?
Oh, I like to listen to music.
Yeah.
Take a dip in the pool when it's summer. I like to exercise.
Yeah.
I love exercise, even if I'm feeling like heavy and tired and distressed. Love it. That becomes my me time.
Yeah, awesome.
With the reward at the end of going out to dinner and doing stuff, which is obviously with others, but it's my reward for self. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And last question on the Feel Good Five is, what's made you laugh recently?
Oh, interesting. Apart from you. Yeah, I saw actually it was this morning, the most recent was a reel shared in our family correspondence group, a reel about what it's like to be a parent when you just put your legs up and have your coffee, and then all of a sudden in comes child one, child two, child three, and it continues. And it was hilarious. It was so close to real. You just got to sit back and laugh.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, those real kids will do that. Kids will do that. Well, look, I've got a few things that I want to say as we wind up, because I'm so incredibly grateful for our friendship and everything that you have given me and supported me over the years. Like I said, the Laughter Clinic is what it is today. A big part of that has been your support, and you believed in me when I might not have believed in myself, and you challenged me and supported me, and there's so many ways that I am grateful for everything that you've given me over the years. I really am. And the work that I'm doing, is really important to me, and I know that in some way I'm making a difference. It's like, just like the work that you will never know, Jacinta, how many lives that you have saved, and for you, you'll never know. You just keep going, and it's an absolute credit to you and who you are as a human and everything that you bring to the world. And for those people that are affected by suicide or have lost someone to suicide, I just want you to know that there are so many more people like Jacinta out there that are just dedicated, that dedicate their lives to this, because it is one of those things that once you start working in this sector, you don't want to stop. You know, like I can picture myself doing what it is I do now for as long as I'm drawing breath.
Yeah.
You know, so thank you. I will make sure that there are links in the show notes to AISRAP and STARS if there are any people listening that would like to investigate the STARS protocol, and share this episode with someone, because it's such an important conversation not to keep to yourself. You know, like if this has struck a chord with you in some way, you know, share it with your network, share it with someone who you feel as though may benefit, and, you know, leave a comment, because that's how we get the word out there and help people, as many people as what we can. And that's the whole idea of this. So, Jacinta Hawgood, thank you so much for your time and everything that you do.
Thank you so much.
And for our listeners, thank you for listening. And as always, my friends, please look after yourself and look after those around you. I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. The information contained in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not intended, nor should it ever replace, advice received from a physician or mental health professional. Want more info? Visit thelaughterclinic.com.au. If you enjoyed the episode, please share and subscribe. Thanks again for listening to the Laughter Clinic podcast with your host, Mark McConville.